My name is Emily Johnson. I have a husband, Stephen, of the same age and a 7-year-old daughter. We decided to go on a family trip for the first time in several years. Our destination is a luxury inn used by my husband for his company trips. On the first night, I suddenly woke up and heard someone's voice coming from the bathroom. Curious, I went to check and was shocked by what I saw. Huh? To my surprise, my husband and the young innkeeper, Susan, were in the middle of an affair. The room had a private outdoor bath, and the changing area was spacious. They left their clothes in the changing area and were in the bath. I secretly listened to their conversation for a while. It's thrilling to do this right in front of your wife, isn't it? Doesn't it make it more exciting? I wonder if your wife will wake up. She won't. Once she's asleep, she hardly wakes up. But doing this in front of the family is something else. From their conversation, it seemed they had been involved for a while. Thinking back, I did find their overly friendly behavior at the reception a bit odd. You called the young innkeeper by her first name, are you that close? No, it's just, she asked me to call her that. All my colleagues call her by her first name too. My husband said this, but something didn't sit right with me. I noticed the way she looked at my husband was quite intense. And my husband clearly got flustered when asked about her. Despite witnessing their affair, I was surprisingly calm. Of course, I was hurt, but I felt more outraged. I quietly took their clothes and knocked on the bathroom door. When our eyes met, they stopped moving as if time had frozen. Emily. Ah. When I opened the door, they desperately tried to cover themselves. Neither of them wanted to meet my eyes. Having an affair in our room, how bold of you. It's not what it looks like, there's a little explanation for this. What kind of explanation could there be for an affair? Just so you know, I've got everything recorded on my phone. I had recorded them on my phone. I didn't want to keep such a thing, but I needed evidence. I was surprisingly calm about it. Well, I'll be keeping these clothes then. That's a problem. Please give them back. Susan has to work too. Please, give them back. No. You two just wait here for now. What are you gonna do? That'll be a surprise for later. Enjoy the rest of your time together. With that, I closed the bathroom door. I also locked the changing area door. The lock worked from both inside and outside. They could open it, but without clothes, they wouldn't be able to go outside. As I was packing up, my daughter woke up. Mom, what's wrong? I'm sorry, but you need to go home with me now. Why? What happened? Then, the daughter glanced towards the bathroom. The bathroom was visible from the room, and upon seeing two people there, she let out a small scream. Why is Dad? Her voice was trembling. It was no surprise she was shocked after seeing such a scene. I hugged my daughter. I'm sorry. What's Dad doing? That person is from the inn, right? Dad betrayed me and you, Nancy. I'm sorry you have such a terrible father. The daughter seemed to understand something even as a child. The husband was desperately gesturing something to her, but her eyes had completely lost their warmth. I'm fine as long as I have you, Mom. I'll follow you no matter what. I was pleased to hear my daughter's words. My mind had been made up since I saw the affair. But I had thought she might not want to leave her father. Thank you. Let's go home for now. Okay. Then, I picked up our bags and left the room. The husband knocked on the door desperately, but we ignored him and left. Of course, I had thought about what to do next. Even if we divorced, it wouldn't be interesting to just leave it at that. First, I planned to show our parents the scene. The in-laws were reasonable people. They would be furious to know that their son had betrayed us and was having an affair during our trip. Naturally, my parents would be livid as well. Luckily, the drive from our house to the inn was about an hour. Not too far, which was a relief. I immediately contacted both sets of parents when I got home. They both said they would come right away. Feeling it was unfair to involve my daughter in adult discussions, I decided to leave her with the kind neighbor lady she was close with. After I briefly explained the situation, the neighbor sympathized with us. I'm sorry to ask, but could you please take care of my daughter? Then my parents arrived at the house, and we agreed to meet the in-laws at the inn. The in-laws had also called my husband's uncle. That would probably make my husband panic. When we returned to the inn with my parents, the place was in an uproar. Susan's mother apologized to us as soon as she saw us. "I've heard a bit from my daughter. I'm terribly sorry for doing something that could ruin someone's family." It seems the innkeeper, worried when we didn't check out on time, had gone to our room. There, she found two people undressed. After confronting them, she seemed to have understood the situation. Since then, the two were dressed in the inn's bathrobes and had been waiting in another room. Susan's mother intended to talk with us as well. Led by her to the room where they were waiting, there were they, heads down. Stephen turned pale at the sight of his parents-in-law and my parents. The first to approach Stephen were his parents-in-law. Then his father-in-law struck Stephen's face hard. "You! What are you doing? You said you'd always cherish Emily and Nancy, didn't you? I'm sorry. This isn't something you can just apologize for. I never thought you'd be someone who'd betray his family so easily. And an affair in your room at the inn, what were you thinking? I'm really sorry." Stephen fell silent. He seemed at a loss for words. Then, we sat down to talk. First, we decided to hear the full story from them. "When did you two start this relationship?" "About a year ago, I guess." Of course, I never intended to cheat at first. It appeared Susan had made the first move. She had been attracted to Stephen, who visited yearly on a company trip. Knowing he was married, she had restrained her feelings. However, they had a chance to talk, and she couldn't hold back her feelings and confess to Stephen. Seeing his receptive response, they exchanged contact details and started communicating. Gradually, they began meeting and developed a romantic relationship. Even if you didn't intend to at first, the fact remains you two were involved. You started going out alone more on weekends, and you were meeting her then, weren't you? Stephen nodded slightly. I was just disgusted and could only sigh. Thinking back, Stephen had become distant and checked his phone more often. When I asked, he was noticeably flustered. He had also suddenly started locking his phone, which he hadn't done before. I never snooped, but it did bother me. I felt pathetic for not realizing for a whole year. Then, Stephen said, "I'm sorry for betraying you too. But I don't want a divorce. I want to keep living with the three of us." "What? That's not for you to decide." "Of course, I know that, but I never intended to break up our family. I love you the most, Emily." Stephen was tearfully pleading. But his words didn't reach me at all. What was he thinking? Did he not understand what he had done to us? My anger towards him grew even more. But I wasn't the only one angry. Suddenly, Susan stood up. "Wait a minute. Stephen, you said you were gonna marry me, right? You always said you loved me more than your wife. Were those lies?" Susan became hysterical. She lunged at Stephen aggressively. "That was just something I said in the heat of the moment. I told you from the beginning that I didn't want to ruin my family." "Huh? I never heard such a thing. I was planning to marry you, Stephen. What about my feelings?" "I can't help you with that." Stephen must have led her on with his words. I felt a bit sorry for her. Then, the innkeeper, Susan's mother, went to her daughter. "Enough of this. Don't embarrass me any further." "But I was really in love with Stephen. Did you want to be with him bad enough to destroy another family? I loved him that much. Isn't it natural to want to be with the person you love, even if they're married? Why do I have to be the one blamed?" "Just stop talking." Saying this, the innkeeper slapped her daughter's cheek hard. Susan burst into tears on the spot. "Don't you feel any remorse?" her mother asked in a cold voice. But Susan kept crying, unable to answer. Then her mother sighed heavily and said, "I'm calling off the plans to entrust you with the inn. Leave the inn today. I don't want to work with you anymore." "Wait a minute. Then who will take over the inn? Mom, you said you wanted me to handle it." I did want to leave it to my own daughter. But I don't want a daughter who cheats in her father's inn to take over. He must be saddened in heaven. The inn was started by the innkeeper and her late husband. But he passed away suddenly from an illness 5 years ago. Since then, she and her daughter had been managing the inn. It's understandable she couldn't forgive infidelity in a place they held dear. The innkeeper's anger towards her daughter was apparent. I'll handle the inn for now. Don't come back home either. I don't even want to think of you as my daughter. Don't say that. It's not all my fault. Stephen led me on too. At this point, a person who can't even express remorse is hopeless. You need to deeply reflect on your actions. And of course, you need to take responsibility towards his wife. Why? Why me? Rejected by her mother, Susan began to cry softly. But no one was there to console her. Then it was Stephen's turn. His parents-in-law approached the shrunken figure of Stephen. You know this, but we're cutting ties with you. Don't ever come back home. Are you serious? We're serious. We never want to see your face again. Stephen loved his mother. He seemed hurt by his father-in-law disowning him, but being rejected by his mother seemed to hurt more. Stephen began to cry, shaking like a child. Why did I ever fall for such a pathetic man? It's a mystery to me now. His uncle approached the crying Stephen next. There was a reason his uncle had come. I'll report this incident to your boss. You're in sales, and if this affects your clients, it'll be a problem. Please, don't report this to my boss. If I get fired, the company won't fire you easily, but you'll surely lose your place there. The boss is a devoted husband. If he hears about your affair, he might not even speak to you anymore. Please, just don't tell my boss. Stephen, trembling, pleaded with his voice. His uncle, who runs his own business, is a CEO. Stephen got his current job through his uncle's connections. Back then, after being laid off from his previous job, his uncle had helped him find this one. Thanks to his uncle, Stephen was able to work under great conditions. If he had to change jobs now, there's no doubt his salary would drop to less than 2/3 of what it is now. He had struggled a lot in his job hunt before, so he probably didn't want to go through that again. Please. I don't want this issue to reach the boss. I've been doing well at the company, and I don't want to ruin my reputation all at once. You're the one who did something that would lower your reputation. It's your own responsibility. Of course, I know I'm the one at fault, but I think you know this, but I'm also cutting ties with you. Even if you lose your job and struggle to find another, don't come asking for my help. I won't assist you. That's harsh. Rejected by his uncle, despair was evident in Stephen's eyes. He's the type of person who cares a lot about what others think. If he's ostracized at work, it's highly likely he'll quit. He seems to believe that everything would be fine if we don't divorce. Emily, you would struggle if you divorced me, right? Why would you think that? Because we have Nancy, and you alone would have limits in supporting her. Despite what Stephen says, there would be no issue if he wasn't around. I work full-time and earn more than him. Plus, I have savings from before we were married. My parents have also said they would support me if anything happened, so there's no need to force myself to stay with him. Stephen seems to believe that I would struggle if we divorced. Nancy is growing up, and she's talented, so her education will cost a lot. She needs my support. I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but I can raise her by myself. Did you forget that I earn more than you? That may be true, but you never know what could happen in the future. And wouldn't it look bad in society if she didn't have a father? Stephen really seems to want to avoid divorce at all costs. However, my mind is made up. Sorry, but I have no intention of getting back together with you. Even if it was just one affair, anyone would be turned off after seeing that. I'm angry now, but I'm also deeply hurt. I'm sorry. But I'll never betray you again. I'll even apologize to Nancy. There's no need for that. She already said she doesn't want to see you. What? Stephen seemed deeply affected by this, standing agape for a while. Did you really think after showing her that, we could just go on like normal? But, I'm the only father Nancy has. It's unfortunate that you're her only father. She even said she never wants to marry someone like you, a betrayer. I just hope she doesn't develop a negative view of men. Learning that even his daughter had rejected him, Stephen started crying profusely. I was astounded at how much he could cry. Yet, Stephen wouldn't easily give up. Please. You're all I have, Emily. I won't cheat again, and I won't even come to this inn. Just give me another chance. Saying this, Stephen clung to my arm. I shook off his hand. Don't touch me, okay? I've decided to divorce you. Then, his mother spoke up. Persistent men are disliked. You have no say in this, so just follow Emily's decision quietly. Why are you against me too, Mom? Parents are supposed to support their kids. Don't talk nonsense. I'm not your mother anymore. Don't call me Mom so casually. These words seemed to deeply sting Stephen, and he was left speechless. Stephen and his mother-in-law used to be very close. His father was strict, so she often defended Stephen. She was always gentle and kind to me too. This was the first time I had seen her this angry. Then, she apologized to me. Emily, I'm so sorry for hurting you and your family. Maybe it's because I spoiled him too much. It's not your fault at all. I'm actually grateful to you, so please don't worry about it. Then, my father-in-law also bowed his head. I always taught him that he must protect his family no matter what. I'm sorry it turned out to be a betrayal. No, thank you for always being so kind to Nancy. Of course, I don't blame either of you. If it's okay with you, I'd still like you to be a part of Nancy's life. Thank you. It seemed my in-laws were worried they might never see their granddaughter again. They were tearful at my words. After finishing with my in-laws, I turned my gaze back to Stephen. His face was a mess from crying. Emily, is it really over between us? I've already told you it is. Of course, I expect you to take responsibility. I see. Stephen seemed to realize that anything more he said would be futile. He muttered as if he had given up. Make sure you pay the alimony and child support. Nancy doesn't seem to want to see you for now, so don't expect any visits. Okay. Stephen answered with a trembling voice. Then I turned to Susan, Stephen's affair partner. She flinched when our eyes met. Of course, I'll be asking you for compensation too, so please be prepared for that. Eh? Her face turned pale at the mention of compensation. Then she said something ridiculous. Compensation, like about $2,000? I can't pay if it's too much, can you keep it low? $2,000? What are you talking about? Do you even understand how compensation works? Susan's statement made her mother, the innkeeper, turn red with anger. She probably didn't expect her daughter to be so ignorant of the world. Don't say such stupid things. Do you think compensation for an affair is only $2,000? It'll be at least $20,000. We'll discuss the details through lawyers. Wait! I don't have that kind of money! Mom, help me! Susan, pale and desperate, turned to her mother for help. She clearly didn't understand the normal amount for compensation. For reference, Susan is 27 this year. Though young, she's in her late 20s. And should know better. Don't you know anything about having a relationship with a married man? I only heard the name of compensation. That's ridiculous. Her mother sighed heavily. Hey, can you pay it first, Mom? The inn makes money, right? We have money, don't we? Don't joke! You're an adult, aren't you? Clean up your own mess! Her mother shouted angrily. Realizing she couldn't rely on her mother, Susan turned to me for mercy. I won't meet your husband again. Can't you let me off the compensation? I don't have any savings, and I even have debts from overspending due to stress. It seemed her mother wasn't aware of Susan's debts. But that's none of my concern. Of course, I intend to hold her responsible as well. Your debt isn't my problem. It's something you created yourself. But I've been fired from the inn. If I get more in debt, I can't survive. I have a life ahead of me too. What is this woman talking about? I got angry at her absurd statements. My life is at stake too. You two destroyed my family. Think about my daughter who lost her father. Compared to that, your troubles don't seem like much. You brought this upon yourself. You really only think about yourself. I may have spoken harshly, but I think she needed to hear it to understand. Susan started crying, trembling. She didn't say anything more. Finally, I turned my gaze back to Stephen. Let's handle the rest through a lawyer. Nancy and I will be going back to my parents' house. What about the house we live in? If you want to stay there, that's fine. But I doubt you can afford the rent on your own. Our house is a rental. And I've been paying more of the rent since I earn more. Stephen, probably worried about his future, turned pale. How am I supposed to live from now on? Don't ask me. Why don't you live with her? After we divorce, you're free to do as you like. Susan still seems to have feelings for Stephen. But he remains silent, looking down. He probably has no intention of being with her. It was all just a game to him. Susan whispers tearfully. I'm sorry. Stephen apologizes without making eye contact, still looking down. Then Susan starts crying loudly like a child. Her cries could be heard outside the room, and some staff peeked in. Susan knew Stephen was married and still got involved, so I have no sympathy for her. I decided she must take responsibility too. Our divorce was eventually finalized. Thanks to the lawyer, the negotiations went smoothly. Stephen couldn't argue against the legal professionals. We demanded a lump sum for compensation from both Stephen and Susan. On top of that, Stephen had to pay child support and we settled the property division properly. Stephen handed over all the shared assets and paid the child support in full. It was his way of showing some remorse. After the divorce, Stephen quit his job when his affair was exposed at work. He struggled to find another job and is now living in an apartment and working part-time. With the compensation and child support, his savings must be nearly gone, so he's likely living a tight life. Susan is also making ends meet with part-time jobs. As for me, I moved to an apartment with Nancy to start a new life. Nancy doesn't want to see her father, so there's no need to force a meeting. I still have a good relationship with my in-laws and visit them occasionally. I'm looking forward to a brighter future with Nancy, just the two of us.